so this time, boys and girls, we're looking at the parable of the prodigal son. So Jesus was telling people about salvation and how it works, and he used this example when he wanted to explain to people how it is you get from God's judgment into God's forgiveness. So he told this story. He told the story of two sons, and the younger son went to his father and he said, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance now. I want to leave." And that was wrong. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't take his father's inheritance while his father's still alive. But his father said, "Okay, I will do that." So his father divided up his estate, his house, everything he owned, all his money, all his animals, his cattle, split it into two halves, and the younger son took his half and he went away. He went off to a far land, and in the parable Jesus said he then squandered his money. The young man squandered his money with friends, with wild living, partying. He was giving money to people, he was buying friendship, and he was having a great time. And he thought, this is way better than when I was working for my father in the family estate. But after a while, there was a famine in the land, and the money soon ran out. And he found that the friends he thought he'd had, they weren't really his friends. When he went to ask them for money, or the people he'd lent money to, they wouldn't give him any. And so he began to be hungry. He was in need. He was impoverished. And so he thought, well, what can I do? His only option was to hire himself out to a man who said, "Okay, well, I'll give you a little bit of money maybe if you go and feed my pigs." So he worked as a pig farmer. And Jesus picked a pig farmer because for the Jews in particular, who he was telling this story to, pig farming was the least respectful work you could possibly do. Pigs were seen as ceremonially unclean animals, so to work with them was the most embarrassing and the most lowly paid work available out there. And he was getting paid so little feeding these pigs that he wished he could eat the pigs' food. So his state had gone from being incredibly wealthy and rich, and he'd blown it all, and now he's there with no food, no money, and he starts to think, my father's servants back home, they have plenty to eat. Why am I here feeding pigs when I could go back and just hire myself? What if I hire myself to my father and say, "Father, I'm not worthy of being your son anymore, but if you'll let me come back, I will work for you as one of your servants, and I'll get some food that way." So he set off back home. But when he was a long way off from home, when he was still on the journey, his father saw him, and his father ran out down the road to meet his son. And when the son met his father, he says, "I'm not worthy of being your son anymore. I've blown it. I've spent all the money that you gave me. I've wasted your resources. Please make me one of your hired hands and give me some food to eat." But his father said, "My son has returned. Bring a golden purple robe, put it around him. We're going to celebrate that my son has returned." So his father accepted him back as his son, not as a servant. And they began to celebrate the return of this prodigal son. The older son, though, was out in the fields. Now, he'd been working diligently with his father all the time that the younger son had been away squandering the father's money. And the older one called one of the servants and he said, "What's going on here? Why is there celebrating in the house?" And the servant said, "Well, haven't you heard? Your younger brother has returned and your father has thrown a celebration and he's even brought out the best food." So in those days, they would have a special cow set aside, and when someone famous or if a special guest came, that's when they would unfortunately turn the poor cow into beef burgers. So the cow had been slaughtered, the fattened cow as they would call it, was slaughtered. So this was a very big celebration. And the older brother was angry. He thought, that's not fair. I've worked hard. I haven't wasted my dad's money. I've looked after the estate. And he refused to go in. So his dad came out and tried to reason with him. He said, "We should celebrate that your brother has returned." And the older son said, no, this is not my brother. I refuse to accept him. So the older brother missed out on the celebration. He was outside while the feast was happening inside. The older brother was thinking about all the things the younger brother had done. He couldn't forgive the younger brother, whereas the father could. Now, the father reasoned with him and said, he's still your brother. In spite of what he's done, we have to celebrate that this younger brother of yours has returned. The moral of the story that Jesus was telling was a warning to the Jews. See, Jesus was saying to the Jews, you're like the older brother. You've stayed within God's kingdom for all the time that the younger brother, the Gentile church, has been away doing idolatry. But Jesus is saying what's going to happen is the younger church the Gentiles are going to come back in, and you stand at risk of being left out of the wedding feast because you will not accept the return of your younger brother, that is, the Gentiles. You see, when God forgives, he forgives completely, and we are all like that younger son. We've all wasted what God's given us. We've all wasted his opportunities. But if we return to him, if we come to God in repentance, just as the son came to the father, admit our guilt, admit that we've done wrong, then we can be accepted and will be accepted back into God's family. And there is celebration in heaven when one sinner returns. So we are not to reject those who come back, but we are to welcome those whom God has redeemed. Okay, so boys and girls, if you go off to Sunday school now, and I'll hand back